Hi, this is Anna Imagination with a Healing Garden. One moment while I play with my lights. Which one do I like? Definitely too dark, right? Actually, I think I really like that one. You know what? I think I do like that one. Oh, that is so much nicer than what I've been using. Okay, so this is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden, and welcome to Shifting Perspectives. Yes, I changed my branding because, oh my God, I could not stand the stuffiness. Then that's just it, is stuffiness. So if you take a look at the graphic that I put up there for this particular video, the topic of discussion is one of my favorites. It's called expectation metric versus an ethical metric. Now, I need to write this down because it's one of those things where I'm going to keep forgetting. So I need to write down expectation metric versus an ethical moral versus ethic. All right, so we're going to talk about this. The 17th century aristocracy mindset plus the Victorian mindset equals present-day patriarchy and rat race mindset. In order to fully comprehend this, in order to understand where my sources are coming from, it comes from sociology, it comes from philosophy. John Filmer, the 17th century philosopher, founder of the patriarchy concept and terminology, as well as psychology. I really love citing my sources. I think I'm going to do that from now on. So this is how this works. Basically, societies stack on top of each other. They borrow from other societies. It's not suddenly that just poof came into an existence. That doesn't happen. So basically, around the 1700s, specifically with Voltaire's work, Voltaire did a lot to contribute to fighting this. I love Voltaire. He fought it a lot. There was this aristocracy mindset, and it was really summarized and articulated very well in work like Voltaire's Candide and in other philosophical works, where it was very much, well, to be blunt, it was the same fight that we're having today, where it's this aristocracy mindset versus free spirits. And we're still fighting it today. It never went away. It's still there. But in the 19th century, we added Victoria, the Victorian era, onto that as well. So it became this conglomerate of this aristocracy, this aristocracy mindset that merged with the Victorian era mindset. And when those two things came together, what we have as a result is what we are in today. So a lot of what we are in today is actually a cocktail of that 16th or 17th century and 19th century mindsets that have just oozed together. And once you study, if you were to sit down and study work like Voltaire or John Filmer or John Milton, you will see a lot of the same stuff recycled over. You will see our society dripping with it to the point where it's like, oh my God, I'm suffocating. Now, you have people who are free thinkers who've basically evolved past that stage because they've gone on with their growth because they value growth rather than comfort. So they've gotten outside of that. And they don't know that it's Victorian age, and they don't know that they're up against that 16th century, 17th century aristocracy because they've gotten away, because they never studied sociology, bottom line. But when you finally get to that point where you're a free spirit and you get away from it, you really start to realize that there is this massive expectation metric that really just hovers over you. One of my favorite examples of this is this very stuffy, conformist button right up to here in the throat kind of a concept with a Professor McGonagall. I really much see a Muggle version of Professor McGonagall. Just, oh, that isn't proper. That isn't the way we do things. I see this very much being like the model of societal expectation. And it is an expectation metric. Now, this is not an ethic. This is not an ethic. This is an expectation metric. So when you hear the words right and wrong, we are actually holding those words based off of this expectation metric that was defined by John Milton and John Filmer back in the 1600s, and to which Voltaire openly mocked with his writing. I really loved Voltaire. In addition to that, you then had the Victorian era coming along and putting all this massive, oh, this isn't proper on top of this. So it now fused into this concept of what's right and what's wrong. And it's no longer about what's ethical. They've long since abandoned ethics because around the 1600s, compliments of the aristocracy mindset, they threw out our philosophy. Philosophy is the study of what is right and what is wrong, of ethics. And when they got rid of the philosophy, people stopped comprehending what ethics were. As a result, people stopped using ethics as a metric and they started using societal expectations as a metric. So 99% of the time, when you hear someone say right or wrong, they are not referring to ethical good, ethical bad, ethical wholesome versus ethical evil. They're not talking about that at all. They're not talking about ethics. What they are talking about is the societal expectation of what is right, accepted, and what is wrong, unacceptable. So again, it's that gorgeous McGonagall, oh, that's improper. So really what it is propriety. Propriety is easily one of the grossest words that's ever come into existence. Propriety. Propriety is a societal expectation of what is right and wrong based off of what is accepted as proper versus improper. So propriety, I love to say the word propriety, the state or quality of conforming to conventional accepted standards of behavior, decorum. So when we hear right or wrong, we're actually talking about propriety. We are not talking about ethics. So, example, it is wrong to kill people. We all kind of agree on this. Most of us agree on this because it's not propriety. I believe many others believe that it is wrong because we believe that it's ethically a violation of someone's rights to live. Third perspective aggressors don't really have this ethic. They believe, well, they are not really believing anything. They're not really thinking. They're more on autopilot for their own survival. And they don't feel bad about their survival because their priority is taking care of their own survival at the expense of all others. Third perspective aggressor only thinks that way. So when you are actually looking at right and wrong, and this is fantastic if you are an empath who really struggles with the concept of right and wrong. The reason why is because your metric is not based on the ethics of what you value, which is really where ethics come from, what you value. What it instead is based off of is what is proprietary, what is societally expected of you as a metric. And what ends up happening is basically the societal expectations in that metric, because it doesn't value an individual or imagination or creativity or art or people, throws them all away and uses them as cogs in its machine. So which is exactly what Voltaire was saying, because this is 16th, 17th century mindset, because we are still functioning with a 500-year-old outdated system, so that your purpose in the society is to serve the system and the society. So you are unimportant according to that aristocracy mindset, that a person's value is only as good as how you can be used. So this is inside of most of our heads. And if you're not aware of it, you obey it. Obedience is another really pretty word for slave, because slave is such an ugly word. So we clean that up with the word obedience. Another little trick of the aristocracy. Like I said, if you actually study sociology, Voltaire, and the philosophy of the 1600s, you're going to see so much of it saturated in our system right now. But our system has that gorgeous little twist of Victorian age crammed into it to make it just the right flavor of rat race, the system, and the patriarchy. which is now this gorgeous conglomerate. Now, a society can only stand on the web of truth it weaves. So, if a society has infiltrated itself with deception, illogic, and lies, by the way, lie is just not logical. That's all it is. It's just not logical. Truth is logical. That's it. So again, lie equals no logic, and truth. Okay, so lie actually is intent to deceive, and that requires a lack of logic because lying is not logical because it contradicts the truth. It contradicts what is logical. So lying is illogical. And when you lie and deceive, you end up literally weaving an entire culture and system into that web. So it's going to be a matter of time before it starts to fall apart, which is what's happening is this massive web of lies. The system that we currently have is literally built off of the 17th century mindset and the Victorian age mindset, both of which were based on this massive web of lies, which you would know if you read Candide's Voltaire's Candide, or anything by Voltaire. It's not. I think it's fascinating. I absolutely adore that kind of material. So it's not for everybody. It's really not for everybody. And I understand that. And there's also a lot of work. Like if you have to take in the full scope of sociology, psychology, and philosophy to see this, it's a lot of work. It really is. So I get that people don't do this. But as a result, because you don't do it, because a lot of people don't do it, a lot of people are missing all of this detail. So when you start to connect all of the beautiful little dots, you start to realize that our society is literally just a cocktail of a 1500s John Milton kind of a mindset combined with that Victorian era. And that's where we are today. So to get out of it, you really just need to be open-minded to growth, and you need to start putting together your own logical sense. In order to do that, you have to shift your priority from the societal expectation over to your own metric, your own identity, authenticity. Once you get into your authentic self with your basic core identity of who you are, what you want, what you value, what you feel is ethically right and ethically wrong, and where you build from that is your beliefs, that becomes your ethical truth. Your ethical truth becomes your personal truth, becomes your perspective. You now have a solid perspective that is built on ethical truth, your logic, which is all based off of what you love, what you value, and what you believe, who you are, what your name is, and your authority to own that and to protect it. Huge, huge big deal. So when you do all of this really awesome shit, it leads to you being able to separate yourself from the societal expectation and their metrics. So that when you hear things blasting at you like, oh, that isn't right, that isn't wrong, you can say, well, is that actually ethical, right and wrong? Or is that what you want? Is that just the societal expectation based off of the metric to which you are measuring me? And that's really it, is a lot of people like to use their own societal expectation metric with which to measure other people. Now, the reason why we are clinging so desperately to the societal expectation of this metric is because it's safe. No other reason. It's safe. It is safe because it's predictable, because it is known, because it is defined. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody understands the rules. They have literally merged the concept of expectation with rule, so that when you follow the rules, you're actually following the expectations. So that the concept of an expectation is now synonymous with the concept of a rule. Now, when you throw in those gorgeous fourth perspective thinkers, where they're going, oh, we got to have all the laws and all the rules because we have to have our order so we can project our control. When you have those beautiful people who never learned how to self-govern, they really need those societal expectations. And then they project those societal expectations onto others because they need a sense of control. And then the third perspectives come along and go, if we change the rules, we can pretty much make the fourth perspective dance, which is very much a narcissistic thing to do because narcissists are third perspective aggressors. So to make themselves feel safe, the narcissist, which is a third perspective aggressor, will go, let's change the rules and the societal expectations into whatever we want. That way, the fourth perspective will dance with us. Now, the best thing about the fourth perspective is the fourth perspectives are the police. Not, well, literally and metaphorically, they are the police. Every police person in the world is a third or fourth perspective. The abusive asshole cops are the third perspective narcissists who are using the power with which to literally bully people. The cop who is just there for the moral ethic and the purpose are the people who literally project their own ability to enforce or control a lack of self-governing onto other people by using the rules, the expectations as the adhering law. So they feel in control by enforcing this societal expectation onto others because they lack self-government. Once you get into the world of I have self-government, you suddenly look at the police and go, wow, I don't need you anymore. And we don't. We should be old enough to outgrow the need for a police, which is why the police, every time you talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, people are A and B, because the police only deal with second, third, and fourth perspectives. Only ever deal with second, third, and fourth perspectives. Now, technically, a police is never called on a fourth perspective because the fourth perspective are very obedient to the societal expectations. It's actually the third perspectives who can't change the rules or say, I don't need the rules or are off doing their own thing. I'm going to clarify third perspective aggressors. So who the police are actually dealing with a lot of times. So when you are a police person, you are 99% of the time dealing with a third perspective. Maybe a second perspective who's got anger issues, who's probably going to develop into a third perspective abuser later. So for a police person, 99% of the people they see is a narcissist projecting. And that's all they know. So now you have cops developing a prejudice. Now, it's so funny because every time I talk to a cop, I get the same response every single time. Oh, you're educated. They throw their hands up and they're like, well, we're done here. You don't really need us because you're educated. I've had them say this to me every time. Every time I will find myself in a situation where I'm dealing with a third perspective or a fourth perspective. The best way to handle a third or fourth perspective, call the police. Best way. Because the police step right in. They do all the dirty work and you don't have to deal. It's a boundary. So I call police whenever I'm dealing with a rogue third or fourth perspective. And I'm like, you know what? I know what I need. Because they won't respect women. They don't, in that society anyway, they don't respect women. They don't respect education, but they respect the police because if they're fourth perspective, the police come in and say, and the third perspectives are very well acquainted with the police usually. I'm going to clarify again, third perspective aggressors. You can be a third perspective passive, completely different personality, completely different person. Third perspective aggressor only is the one who are very well acquainted with the police. So police come in and there you have your third perspective coming along with the police. The police immediately do the whole roaring thing in a very, well, usually from what I've seen, they're very, the word I'm looking for, conflict diffusing. They diffuse conflict very beautifully, like they're masters at it, where they'll calm the situation down and they'll calm and then they will redirect. And I've watched third perspectives going from highly abusive down to very submissive, dog obedient, because my cop is my power and authority is bigger than your temper tantrum. And that's pretty much what you get when you bring a cop in. And for me, it's the cops are the same way every time. Oh, you're educated. We know how to handle you. We're good. Yeah. Yeah. So as soon as they see educated people, they know, because cops aren't for educated people, because educated people have learned how to self-govern and hold themselves accountable. Fourth and fifth perspective people. So once you get that fourth, fifth perspective literally internalized, you don't need a rule referee to make sure everyone follows the rules. Somebody who cheats at games, third perspective. Somebody who cheats and lies and manipulates a situation so they can get what they want, third perspective aggressor. Every time. So when you have this beautiful system set up, some third perspectives have learned that if they become a police person or if they become political, they can now change the rules to manipulate and make everybody else dance. The fourth perspectives are really good with keeping everybody in line, making sure everybody follows the rules. And the second perspectives love to follow the fourth perspectives. The second perspective and the fourth perspective are like best buddies. They love each other. Second perspective, and the reason why is because the second perspective has this mindset of, ooh, head of the household is in charge. The authority role is in charge. I only have meaning and purpose if I follow the person in charge. Who is the person in charge? So the second perspective literally idolizes the person in charge. And the person in charge could be the man, the head of the household, whoever's bigger, stronger, whoever is literally the person holding the biggest law book. A judge, oh God, they love their patriarchy. They love their hierarchy. They love their order of pecking order. And the fourth perspective goes around enforcing this. So this second and fourth perspective are like a high codependent relationship. Very, very codependent. So that the second perspective idolizes the fourth perspective. The fourth perspective gets this beautiful ego boost off of that idolization. And as a result, the fourth perspective makes the second perspective its favorite. Which is why if your parent is a fourth perspective and you are a sixth perspective black sheep, but your sibling is a second perspective who idolizes the fourth perspective, boom, that's the favorite child, and you are garbage. I was garbage. I was garbage. And my third perspective brother was third perspective. My youngest brother was second perspective. Before him, it was my sister who was the second perspective. So my sister and my youngest brother idolized my father, who they are both, oh, we have to idolize the head of the household. We have to idolize the leader because that's their mindset. And my father took on the role of, yes, I'm the leader. I'm the one in charge because he's fourth perspective. I follow all the rules and I enforce all the rules. So he would set a rule down and the second perspectives would be very happy to follow the new rule without question. And the third perspective is the one who sneaks into the politics, changes around all the rules, manipulates, and makes everyone dance so that the fourth perspective actually does what the third perspective wants through the new rules that they set, manipulating, because that's what third perspective aggressors do to feel in control because they project their control onto others. So that's that setup. That's how all of that works, very much. Now, if you're asking the question, well, what about the first perspective? This is fun. The first perspective idolizes the caregiver, which is usually the mother, who is almost always a second perspective. So the first perspective does whatever the second perspective wants. The second perspective, the mother, will say, oh, we have to do what the father wants. And so the second perspective mother leads the first perspective always. Second perspective caregiver always leads first perspective. So first perspective and second perspective are codependent. The second perspectives follow the fourth perspectives, codependent. The third perspectives are manipulating the fourth perspective and everything else, making it all dance for it. And then the fourth perspective is making sure the second perspective stays in line, knowing that the second perspective is going to lead and lure and dictate the first perspective, which is why a lot of fathers back in the 50s and today say, oh, well, that's your mother's job. Your mother needs to take care of that, because it's not a woman's role. Yeah, that's how they translated it later. But it was actually the fourth perspective saying the second perspective caregiver is in charge of the first perspectives. Second perspective mother comes along and says, yes, I am the second perspective. I will manage the first perspective. Oh, you wait till your father gets home, says the second perspective to the third perspective. The third perspective has gone off on its own Lord of the Flies campaign. The Lord of the Flies campaigner will then maybe sneak into the rule system, change rules around, go off, become a drug addict, do its own thing. Sometimes they will become a gang member. They'll go off and do their own thing. And then that fourth perspective father will come in. Oh, and here's the father coming in, beating the crap out of the third perspective. Third perspective then projects that violence onto a poor suspecting second perspective, or worse, well, the same, it's all pretty bad, onto a sixth perspective who's trapped in this massive cycle of shit. So, boom, foundationals. Those are the foundationals. This is what happens when children don't grow up. This is what happens when your first, second, third, 4-year-old stops growing intellectually. Because this is all this is. A second perspective is actually a 2-year-old mindset. A third perspective is actually a 3-year-old mindset. And a fourth perspective is actually a 4-year-old mindset. Only they're now 55 years old and have jobs in Washington, D.C. Yeah, yeah, that's why the world's gone to shit. Because we stopped growing. We stopped growing because a bunch of third and fourth perspectives who hate growth and education cut out all of our education department, which is why you should not put a 3 or a 4-year-old in charge of a country. So our education department got cut. Back in the 1700s, they said, we don't need philosophy. And they threw that out, and they did. They cut philosophy out. So if you wanted to study philosophy, you had to go to a highly prestigious school, a university, and you had to take a course on philosophy. It was very rare and very unusual for anyone to take a course in philosophy at that time period, until finally it's now this archaic dead thing that no one studies. It's really important that you study philosophy because it teaches you how to think. But they don't want you to think because the fourth and the third perspectives love being in charge. So when you finally get to that point where you realize that you are an ethical 6, when you realize that you prioritize different things, it becomes this massive ethic war of what's important. That's really what we're all arguing about, whose ethics is right. My favorite topic, and I'll show you some topics, are animals sentient? That's the number one topic. Are animals sentient? This is a 6th perspective plus perspective. This is the ethic of the 6th perspective. It is when you realize at the 6th perspective that animals are sentient. And suddenly you respect all sentience, whether it be spider, cockroach, or rat, or bird, or cat, or cow, or sheep. Suddenly you're in a position where you're going, they're sentient. They have to live. So that if you kill a beetle, you have guilt because they're sentient. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. It does not happen overnight. It's somewhere between the 5th perspective and the 7th perspective. And here I am at 11th perspective, and I'm still struggling killing cockroaches because I'm going, it's sentient. What are you doing? But it's a cockroach in my house. But it's sentient. This is why I'm so pissed off about the Hoover Dam, is because they have made over 135 fish species extinct. What are you doing? That's genocide. It's genocide. So right now, the Hoover Dam is creating mass genocide. And everyone who's 4th perspective and under doesn't know, doesn't care. 6th perspective goes, oh my God, 135 species of fish have gone extinct because of the Hoover Dam. Google it. It's disgusting. 6 perspectives and over understand this. So now we're asking the question of animal sentience. This is how it works. When you get around the 5th perspective, it starts to happen. Near the end of the 5th perspective, it creeps in. You are evolving into a higher stage of growth. By the time you get into 6th perspective, you suddenly are a vegetarian. Now, this is where you're going, okay, what about fish? Are fish sentient? And you're on that cusp where you're not quite sure. In the 5th perspective, you may have stopped eating beef. You may have switched over to just chicken. Maybe you're just eating turkey. By the time you get into the 6th perspective, you've cut beef, lamb, all of it out. Maybe you even stopped eating chicken. Now you're just eating fish. So you might start off as being just a pescatarian, which is somebody who eats fish. It's a vegetarian who also eats fish. But then you get to a point where you're going, no, I can't even do that now. Tuna and salmon are sentient. So then you get into the, I'm just going to be a vegetarian. Then you start looking at the ethical rights of farming animal, vegan. And that's where you're going, can I eat the chicken egg? Can I eat and you start to balance because you are actually battling your own ethic of whether or not you should consume sentience. Consuming sentience is cannibalism. We think, oh, it's cannibalism if you eat your own species. Yeah, except now you're starting to see other species as being equal to you. Now you're battling with sentience. I was there at 4 years old. So And there's like you come to this stage at any point. So the more you grow, the more you finally get to this point, the more you realize what is the sentience of animal? At what point is it okay? At what point do you finally step out of that? And it's not about flavor. It's not about how cute the animal looks or if it has a face. It's about sentience. It's that thing in your head. And it's gradual. It's a stepping stone. And it depends upon where you are on that ethical chain, on that ethical table. So it's not boom, overnight, I'm a vegetarian. Maybe it happens that way for you. Everything is a spectrum. So it's a where does this fall? Now you have the divide of foundationals all going, oh, we have canine teeth for a reason. So irrelevant to the point, really irrelevant to the point, but okay. So you have that. You have that argument. And then you have the fourth perspectives who do a lot of criticizing. Then you have some fourth perspectives who think it's funny or they will set it up. In the meantime, sixth perspectives and higher are really handling and dealing with this. At what point ethically is it okay to consume another person? Because in my mind, those are people. So it's personal. It's a personal ethic. And at the end of the day, you need to figure out where you stand on this. So this is one of those ethics that's really solid on where you stand. And there's a lot of ethical abuse. There's an ethical abuse. That's it. There's a lot of perspective abuse on what is right, what is wrong. And we're back to are you measuring on the expectation societal metric, or are you actually measuring on ethics itself? Because ethic is different, completely different. The ethics, the order of ethics, the first one is the value of authority. And it's literally what you value. That is your ethic. It's what you value. It's the question, who has the authority? How important is the self or the ego? Where is your autonomy? How well do you trust people? How resourceful are you? Should you be resourceful? Can you turn nothing into something? Can you self-govern? Can you accept your own limitations and ask for help? Third perspective. Are you holding yourself accountable? Accountability is something that I think is very funny because people think that you can put accountability onto other people. Accountability is the opposite of responsibility. Responsibility is basically a discussion over who's responsible for what. But accountability is actually holding yourself responsible. The thing is, accountability only exists in the self. You can't hold other people accountable. We try with the justice system, but we really miss the point, which is why they're not internalizing the message. If you have somebody who refuses to hold themselves accountable for their crime, you can punish them, but they're not going to learn. You can lock them up. You can sentence them, but they're not going to learn. Because accountability is not something you can force or project onto other people, which is what the justice system tries to do. You did X. We've proven that you've logically done X. So we're going to hold you responsible and have you be accountable for your actions. So we're going to give you 25 years in prison. 25 years goes by, this person never evolves, they never grow, because this is the fifth perspective. So they sit in prison at the third perspective the entire time, not intellectually growing, refusing to budge from where they are. You want to change this? Make education fun. Make education something that people actually want, so that they will actually grow and enjoy it, so that they'll actually do it, so they'll have the enticement to be educated, and then they will grow. But when you cut down education and you give them shitty, ugly buildings, and you fill those ugly, shitty buildings with really poor lighting and no colors, yeah, and then you tell them that there's no choice, they have to go there, people aren't going to want to learn. People are going to associate horrible things with education, which is why you see this massive cycle of, I hate education. Wow, everyone's bullying me. I really hate education now. Wow, everyone is bullying me. Because they associate education, school, with being bullied. So they reject education because they associate education and learning with being abused. And because of that, they reject education for the rest of their life because it's not safe to grow. When it's not safe to grow, they stay put where they are. And that is why the 15-year-old who committed a serious crime, who's sentenced for 25 years later, still hasn't learned anything because they have dug their heels in and said, I refuse to grow. That's why. So once you get to that point of accountability and self-governing, you really have a massive game changer. It's a question of, okay, now where do I go from here? What do I do from here? Once you figure that part out, it completely changes because you've accepted responsibility for the self and for who you are and where you want to go with life. You suddenly value the self. When you value the self, you prioritize the self. But you can't get there until you are at the fourth, fifth, and sixth perspective. It requires the first four perspectives to even get to that point, which is why so many people are stuck in the foundationals. So, to fix this, we come up with a better plan, and we give it only to the six perspectives and higher. We unionize. We come together. After we come together, we give the plan to the cultivators, the fifth and the sixth perspectives. The fifth and the sixth perspectives transfer this now to the foundationals. Start with the fourth perspective. The fifth and sixth perspective, who are teachers, healers, parents, now teach and set an example for the fourth perspectives. They give this information to the fourth perspectives. Fourth perspectives will go, oh yeah, let's do it, because you've changed the law. So when the fifth and the sixth perspective take the material from the sixth perspective plus the visionaries, and they implement it into law, the fourth perspectives will happily follow because that's what they love to do. So the second perspectives and the first perspectives will happily follow because the fourth perspectives have led, because the fourth perspectives are led by law, and the law dictates where the fourth perspectives go, where the second perspective and first perspective go. Very easy to just pull them along, providing you have the right setup. Fifth and sixth perspective need to change the law to reflect the visionaries' agenda that the visionaries are already living and cultivating. The visionaries are kind of like the trial and error stage. You don't want to put the trial and error onto the foundationals because if you're wrong, they're called a foundational for a reason, because they are the foundation of a culture. That is why they are so important. They are the foundation of a culture. So you don't want to use them for trial and error. You want to make sure they get the best of your material. Because when they get the best of the material, they become future visionaries. But it starts with providing them with the best. So we need to make sure we take idea and trial it out on visionaries who can handle the problems, who can find the problems and the objections. So they keep trial and erroring it out like a laboratory. That's what Authenticity City is. It's a laboratory for visionaries to trial out a new society. So when we figure out something that works right, we can then teach it to the cultivators. Visionaries pass the data onto the cultivators. The fifth and sixth perspectives are brought in. Look, this is what we've trial and errored. This is what we've run through the laboratory. This is what we want to give to you. And this is why. So what the fifth and sixth perspectives are getting are actual prime, the best of the best. They take that data and they incorporate it in their own life, setting an example. Now they go into the politics of the fourth perspective system, the foundationals, and they change the law. They change the rule. When they change the law and the rule, the fourth, second, and first perspective happily follow without any problems, and you will see a massive spike of their behavior change. So, what about the third perspectives? Third perspectives need to be left the fuck alone. Third perspectives are in something that I call walkabout. I borrowed this term from Australia because it's such a gorgeous concept. My son was in third perspective for a while, and I isolated him. He had his own apartment. He lived alone for a year. He was 18. From 18 to 19, I just left him alone. He got to learn loneliness because that's what a third perspective needs. They need to learn 100% loneliness, self-reliance. He needed to combine his resources to figure out what he could do. He needed to understand how far he could take his resources. He needed to push himself to a limit before he finally said, okay, now I need help. So that when I step in and I help him knowledgeably, he knew he could trust me. Now I can start trusting people, he says. Suddenly that stubborn, and it's not stubborn, it's actually a very good thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's that moment in our lives when we decide to take everything we are supposed to have for our self-regulation and everything we are supposed to have for our resources, and we combine it and we figure out what we can do with it, what we can create with it. It is self-discovery. Self-discovery requires isolation and alone time, trial and error, failure. All of these things are required at the third perspective. Now, when you have an enabling caregiver, a caregiver who overmanages, and a fourth perspective who's going, oh, you need to follow the rules, that gives no space for the third perspective to do what the third perspective needs to do. The third perspective is when the second perspective needs to back the fuck off, and the fourth perspective needs to just stand there and wait. So it's like the second perspective sends off the child into the wilderness and says, I love you. You can do it. And I'm going to stand by and let you fail, let you thrive, let you learn, let you explore, let you sink, let you stand, let you grow. And when you're done and when you're ready, your provider is going to be on the other side, inviting you in, welcoming you back to society. And the third perspective needs to go on walkabout. When the third perspective finally reaches the breaking point of loneliness, then they will value community. You don't value community unless you've experienced true isolation. Then you understand community. That is when the third perspective breaks and they finally say, I really value community. And that's the shift. When you finally get to that point where you experience so much isolation that you finally value community. So they willingly, with choice, step into community. When that happens, they conform beautifully for a time. Now it's the time to learn how to self-govern. So they're going to excitedly get into the community. They're going to be thrilled and they're going to appreciate people. They're going to appreciate friends. They're going to appreciate law and order until they grow to the point where they realize they don't need help growing anymore. Now they need to self-govern. When they value the point of self-government, that is when they switch and graduate from fourth perspective to fifth perspective. This is natural growth. But in order for it to happen properly, you have to allow the third perspective, the isolation. So once the third perspective gets that isolation, once you allow them the freedom to break away from society and to not answer to any law or order, and the first question that comes back is always going to be, well, we can't let them kill people. No, I'm going to remind you that this is a time period that is supposed to occur when they are 3 years old. If you are stuck in the third perspective, it's because you were not allowed to do this at 3 years old. So yeah, now you're a 55-year-old who is acting like a 3-year-old who has no idea how to self-govern and has no idea how to trust and cannot be alone because a narcissist slash third perspective aggressor has this association of, oh, I need people to control to feel safe. Narcissists hate being alone. And that's exactly what they need. They need to realize that they can be safe, isolated. Still trying to figure out what to do with the third perspective through all of this. But between the fourth perspective, the first and the second, and the fifth and the sixth, being the cultivators, nurturing everyone, and the visionaries working on the problem, I'm pretty sure we'll figure something out. So this is like the last bit of my plan that I'm still going, what do I do with the third perspectives? Because we can't just put these people in isolation indefinitely. Like, what do I do with these people? trying to figure it out, and doing so in such a way where it's going to be safe for them and safe for everybody, with something that's practical, safe for them, safe for everybody, and practical. That's what we need. So figuring that out right now, figuring it out. Now, I do know that as long as we cultivate the new generations with this program, that they will automatically go where they need. Parents need to be parented properly. Parents need to be parented properly. Parents need to understand how to parent properly, which is something I'm going to also cover next. And then in addition to that, it's covering and going over how to teach properly. Teachers understanding. Teachers and parents are the same thing. Teachers, healers, and parents are the same thing. All you are doing is you're talking about the relationship. Are you a parent to a creator? Or, I'm sorry, are you a parent to a creation? Are you a teacher to a student, or are you a healer to a patient? Once you understand these three things, it's the same thing. It's just your relationship is different. But it doesn't matter what your relationship is as long as you have this concept comprehensive and you're applying it properly. That's how it all shifts and moves properly. So that is currently the plan for Authenticity City, World Peace, Operation Imagination, all of it. This is where it all falls down. So we're going to leave that there. I covered a lot of material. So yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to become one of my case studies, it's $500 a week. The link is down below. And that is very much a one-on-one with Triadic Healing. And before we begin, I will be going over everything that you are going to be getting and the goal with Triadic Healing. The flip side of all of this is I have a group that is like the beta testing of Triadic Healing. It is not an atmosphere where you are going to be expected to share your traumas with strangers or in a group setting. That is not it at all. It means that it's more of a DIY, so that in a group, I'm going to be presenting the material with guidance and instruction. And if you need additional help, you will have access to me. You'll be able to contact me for additional one-on-one, but primarily the instructions are going to be given in a group setting. That is $150 a month or $1,500 a year. And that is available also down below if you want to join the Philosopher's Fountain. So I have the Philosopher's Fountain and I have my case studies. And that is available for Triadic Healing if you're wanting to join in either one of those. The Philosopher's Fountain also includes, it's everything. There's like daily assignments, daily check-in, and I'm there on my cell phone, WhatsApp. If you're wanting to check in and say, this is my situation, I can walk you through each individual. And then instead of doing a one-on-one session every week where it's a one-on-one private session, it would be a group class. Yeah, that's really it. It's a group class setting. A professor's class where I sit down and I present to you the next stage. And then if you have any additional material you want to go over, I'll be available for that. So those are the two options for Triadic Healing. And I changed my brand, my logo, oh my God, I love it so much more because it is so much more me and it's more honest, I believe. It's more right to the point and it's a lot less patriarchal garbage. So in summary, I free witches, empaths, healers, and lightworkers from toxic mindsets through natural play learning, story, and logic, so they can have their authenticity, imagination, and dreams again, the source of their power. So and we are very much LGBTQIA, and poly magic is what we are focused on here. In addition, this is imagination story psychology for magical adults. Magical adults is going to become my new thing that I talk about all the time, everywhere. Magical adults. I am a magical adult. So magical adult is anyone who feels different than that boxed gray societal norm. If you feel like you're more rainbow than black and white, you're probably a magical adult. And everything that I do is focused around magical adults. So if you are between the ages of 18, I would work with 15-year-olds, but I don't want to deal with parents because parents are 99% of the problem that children have. And I am so yes, I love children, free the children. I have a huge campaign of free the children because children are used as slaves for parents. So I work with 18 to 35. 18 to 25 is my favorite age range, but really I go up to 35 years old. If you are younger than a Gen X, let's say even less. If you are a millennial, I love millennials. I am like for millennials. I love millennials. So I don't usually work with baby boomers. I rarely work with Gen Xers. I don't. You have to be a magical adult for me to work with you. Millennials are almost always magical adults. Gen Zs are magical adults. Alpha generation are magical adults. Oh my God, they are. Woohoo. I love those people. I love the magical adults. Baby boomers are not magical adults. Very, it's a fluke if you find a baby boomer who is a magical adult. A fluke, I tell you. And Gen Z or Gen X says, I'm a Gen X, but I'm a Gen X millennial. So I'm a Gen Xer who acts more like a millennial because I'm a magical adult. So if you are a Gen X and you identify as a magical adult, or you feel you are a magical adult inside of you, trapped by the patriarchy, that's what I do. My psychology gets you out with authenticity, mindset, and magical thinking. I don't like the concept magical thinking. It's perspective thinking. That's what it is. So if any of that vibrates with you, rings true to your authentic self of, oh, that sounds like me, that vibrates with me. If you identify as a witch, if you understand the energy, if you are a magical adult, LGBTQIA, nonconformist, polyamory, pick your pronouns. You are my people. You are who I work with. If you are not magical and you have no desire to be, now my psychology is not for you. You are probably a fourth. I don't work with anyone who's basically fifth perspective or less. Fifth perspective and higher, I work with. Fifth perspective or less, I don't touch. And fifth perspective and less are not magical adults. But I will be having programs available for them. So if you are a second perspective and you're stuck in second perspective, but you know you're a sixth perspective, you're a magical adult. Come on over. So it's all up to you. It's basically a, do you want to be, or are you an aspiring magical adult? You don't have to be it. If you aspire to be it, that's good enough. Come on over. So that is it. All the links are below. Thank you so much. And may the kindest of words always find you.